Lawyers, what is the most unethical thing you've seen someone do for a lawsuit and actually win? For a year, I worked for the most unethical attorney I have ever met. Here are my top two stories. He took on a client that was injured at work. He sent him to see a doctor that he would refer to as a harlot. Since the attorney normally does defense work, the doctor came back saying the injury was clearly not work-related. The attorney called the doctor to inform him that he represented the employee and not the employer in this case. The doctor then wrote a report that the injury was clearly work-related. One afternoon, the attorney's assistant ran into my room and said I need to go to the courthouse right now to defend the attorney in a traffic case. Attorney told me he had no run-ins with law enforcement before, had never been ticketed before, and would just like to get supervision. I go in front of the judge and present this information, and I get him supervision. I go back to the office, and curiosity got the best of me. I searched his criminal record, and yeah, turns out he had another outstanding speeding ticket, and you could see his mugshot for domestic violence. Oh, and he tried to fine me $5,000 for going to a doctor's appointment on my lunch break. At that point, I literally walked out. Alright, the first story is kind of funny. Knowing that someone hates you so much that if you tell them you're on the other side, they'll accidentally help you. A little clever, a little funny. However, the second one there makes me think maybe I shouldn't be cheering for this person too hard. Story 2. Obligatory, not a lawyer, but my parents got caught up in a slimy lawyer's talons. Basically, they had carpet installed in their house in 2005, paid in cash, got a receipt, and went on with their lives. 7 years later, they get a letter from some law firm saying the company that had installed their carpet never received payment and would press charges if they didn't pay up. My dad, being the paranoid guy he is, kept the receipt and said he would see them in court. He did some research, found out what the attorney can and can't do in this situation, and also found out the attorney had been working with the flooring company for years, accusing paying customers of not paying and collecting excess money from them under the threat of lawsuit. Fast forward to the court date. Dad shows up knowing his rights, with the receipt saying exactly how much he paid and when. Attorney has nothing except a copy of the invoice for my dad's payment that he leaves in his folder the whole time. Not only does the attorney break almost every rule of court possible, he completely slanders my dad, calls him sketchy looking and dishonest, even though the receipt is literally right there in front of him. He insists the receipt is fake, despite having a copy of the invoice. Real crappy stuff. My dad lost that case. Before anyone had even left the courtroom, the attorney walked up to chat with the judge, who asked if they were still on for brunch tomorrow. Because it was a super small circuit, this dude had been able to buddy up to a judge to the extent he was allowed to do basically whatever he wanted and still win his cases. A year later, my parents sued the attorney for misconduct and requested an out-of-circuit judge. The judge essentially told that slimy schmuck to sit the hell down and shut the hell up when he tried to pull something against the rules. They won that case. Story 3. When I was working as a public defender in the Detroit State Court, I routinely saw cops lie about the existence of video recordings of an event. The law says they have to have the cams running when they make a stop, but in all the cases I saw, not a single cop was ever able to produce a video. Either the video had malfunctioned, been accidentally deleted after the event, or the camera was broken. It was a weird place to work. The cops very much viewed the defense lawyers and the legal process as their enemy. Story 4. A friend of a friend woke up in a hospital. He has no idea what happened, but he was brought out of an induced coma from a bike wreck. The car he ended up under was owned by a lawyer. The lawyer and a cop forced the doctors to get the guy out of a coma long enough to sign a statement when no family was present. The lawyer never mentioned to the doctor that it was he who was driving and not a person he represented. The lawyer went on to sue for damages on his car by the guy and his bicycle. Story 5. Lawyer here. I'm proud of what I do, and I believe that I do it the right way. I act in the best interest of my client and work to get them the best possible result within the parameters of the case. The reality is that our role is adversarial, and so the other party thinks that you're the bad guy. That's not hard to live with. It's understandable. It's kind of like being a Bears fan and thinking Aaron Rodgers is the devil. The hardest part about the profession is dealing with the reputation given to all lawyers in the field because of the actions of a small percentage of the community. This post is evidence of that unfortunate reputation. Please remember, if you hear 1,000 unethical stories here, it comes out of a pool of millions of cases handled throughout the country every year. Story 6. Not a lawyer, but I know of a pretty screwed up case. It's kind of a two-parter. Lesbian woman I knew got married and everyone thought the two women were happy. Turns out lesbian's wife was a con artist who was essentially gay for pay until her real fiancé, who was on board with this whole plan, had been at his job long enough for benefits to kick in. His employer at the time did not provide benefits until after at least a year of employment. Real fiancé had been unemployed for a long time, hence the long con with the lesbian woman. She needed to suck the woman in and then get married so that she could get on the lesbian's insurance and also convince her to pay for a phone. Literally, those were the only two reasons the female con artist was with the lesbian: health insurance and a cell phone. The lesbian woman and the female con artist get married at the beginning of the summer. So real fiance gets his employee benefits about 7 months into the marriage of female con artist, and the whole time female con artist is cheating, if you could really call it that. I mean, she was never really loyal to the lesbian, on her wife, with real fiancé. So once real fiancé gets his benefits, female con artist tells lesbian, "I was only with you for the insurance and a phone," and bounces. Female con artist files for divorce, and the lesbian is told by all law enforcement and every lawyer she consults there is nothing she can do about it because 1. Con artist used her real name on all the documents, the marriage wasn't fraudulent, and 2. You would have purchased those things for your spouse anyway, so you have no real damages to sue for. So basically, lesbian is heartbroken and completely screwed over. Since there were no kids and the marriage lasted less than a year, divorce was final in some ridiculously short time, like a month. It may have been an annulment, actually. Flash forward 2 months later, we get a call from lesbian's mother. She's on the way to the hospital because she was notified that lesbian had been assaulted and was in the middle of getting an assault kit done. The story she told the cops was that she had been driving down the road, and someone posing as a cop was following her, eventually pulled her over, and assaulted her in the backseat of her own car on the side of some famously poorly lit road. Well, cops start investigating and lesbian's whole story starts to unravel. They check the surveillance footage at a gas station that she would have had to have passed by, only to discover that not only had nobody been following her, but she was the only car to drive in that direction for 45 minutes. But her kit came up positive. How could that be, you ask? Cops did some digging and found a profile lesbian had made on some dating site. They get a warrant and find out she had made plans to hook up with some guy. They track him down and he tells them everything he knows. He made plans to meet up with this woman who turned out to be our lesbian. He met online, and as they were getting ready to bang, and a few times during, she kept asking, "Have you ever had your DNA taken? Ever had it tested? Are you sure you've never had your DNA tested?" etc. Side note, that part is proof that no guy ever thinks clearly when he wants to get laid. Back to the story. So cops take a sample of dating site guy's DNA to test against the DNA from the kit, and it's a match. Cops figure out that a lesbian faked the assault by hooking up with this guy so there would be DNA, and said that the person impersonated a cop as a plausible reason for why she would have pulled over where she did. She tried to say it happened somewhere that everyone knew there would be no direct evidence of her being there. But the final question remained, why did she go through all that? Cops confront a lesbian very carefully. They don't want it to seem like they don't believe her just because she's gay, even though they have proof that she's been lying this whole time. When confronted, she admits everything. The dating site profile, setting up a dating site guy, lying, everything. And the cops ask her why. She tells them about female con artist, and somehow she reasoned with herself that if she suffered some sort of tragedy like an assault, then female con artist would come back and get back together with her. Like someone who conned you so intimately would really care. Anyway, she is initially arraigned very quickly, and in the intervening time it turns out that the cop tracked down female con artist and got a statement from her. For some reason, female con artist is in the courtroom when lesbian is there getting arraigned. Now remember, the fake assault happened just 2 months after the divorce/annulment, whichever it was. This arraignment is maybe a month after the initial SA report was filed, so figure 3 months since they last saw each other, as a supposedly committed lesbian couple. Female con artist is 7.5 months pregnant. She got pregnant by real fiancé at the beginning of fall, so she was able to hide it under heavy sweaters and such. So she was like 4.5 months pregnant when the original split happened. To this day, no one knows why female con artist was there during the arraignment. Okay, so the prosecution takes forever. For one reason or another, there are constant delays both by the lesbian's lawyer and by the prosecutor's office where this was happening. They were going to throw everything they could at lesbian because of all the money and manpower spent on the investigation, plus it had been somewhat high profile in that town. Charges included manufacturing evidence, filing a false police report, obstruction of justice, and a bunch of others that I forgot. She was looking at 5 years in prison easily. Finally, Lesbian gets her lawyer to tell the prosecutor that if they don't let a Lesbian plead down to some ridiculous misdemeanor, then at trial, they were going to make it look like she was only being prosecuted because she's a lesbian. It was an election year, and the district attorney was terrified of not getting reelected. So they made the deal. She should have gotten at least 5 years in prison, but got off with a year probation. I know this, especially this last paragraph, because the lesbian's mother, who was paying for the lawyer and should have been offended by her daughter's actions because the mother was an actual assault victim, called my dad and regularly kept him up to date. She was proud of the fact that they basically blackmailed the prosecutor into a deal. Well, yeah, that's gross. Clearly, she has some mental distress going on, and she should get that sorted out somehow. Therapy would probably be a good option, but also, faking an assault is so bad for so many reasons. I can't believe she got away with that. Story 7. Lawyer for 12 years here, specializing in estates and trusts. My client was challenging the will her husband left behind, giving the wife and son an equal split of the sizable inheritance he left. The son used to have an opioid addiction, but had been in treatment and a program and had been clean for over 5 years. My client hired a private investigator who befriended the son and pushed him to start using again, selling him a few pills on hidden camera. The wife ended up using the video to successfully convince the judge her husband was under the impression their son was clean when he wrote the will, but since the video showed he still had a serious drug problem, the will could be challenged, and he couldn't be trusted with his inheritance. She got the entire estate, and the son ended up dying a few years later from an overdose. Story 8. I am not a lawyer, but a man who was a customer for the construction company I worked for at the time was a real piece of work. When Hurricane Sandy hit, a tree fell over and hit into his son's room, making a hole in the ceiling. He then decided for the family to take a vacation after the storm and to let the hole and tree be for a bit more than a month. This way, there was massive amounts of water damage and the houses got to be labeled as unlivable. He did this so that not only could he collect the massive amounts of money from the insurance and from the government, but to also turn around and sue them for more money. He got all that money. He had his old house torn down and hired my company to build his brand new state-of-the-art mansion he planned. What the company didn't know is that this guy was a serial lawsuit filer. He sues everyone all the time. He had a decent paying job, but he makes the bulk of his money more from lawsuits, it seems. He sued the bank once for a misfiling and somehow got tons of money from that. He then turned around and sued the lawyer he had for that bank case for not getting him as much money as he wanted, and he won that one somehow too. The project ended up being a nightmare. He had two people who were not licensed architects writing up his blueprints and getting them stamped by a sloppy licensed architect that didn't review the blueprints, probably so he could sue later. And when I say sloppy, the head of my company had to point out how the roof was sticking into the body of the garage and how the steps didn't match up and make it to the different floors, and then would give it back to the customer to have them redo it all, multiple times. Customer also would not contact the plumber to do the work on the days needed, so there were many wasted days. Customer would not pay any of the bills on time when they were due, and we then found out later they were taking doctored pictures the whole time of the property when the company was not on the scene, and calling the town for trash complaints, complaining about wood, pipes, metal, and other materials sitting in the back of property and on sides, not real trash, on his own plot of land during construction, so he could sue us later on. As the job was starting to finish up, it was about 6 months behind schedule due to all these problems, and more that were outside of our control. The head of the company I was with was going to a European country for a wedding of their nephew, and that was prefaced and known before the project was accepted. When they left for said wedding, customer tried to directly contact one of the subcontractors to take over and do the whole project. Illegal and written as forbidden to even talk prices of anything in contract with subcontractor, and put into motion the whole baloney lawsuit against our company. Unfortunately, the company I was with came back to pure hell and arguments, and then pulled out of the project and planned to sue the customer when he refused to pay his next installment, and the installment that had been overdue by a month. Left the house in a terrible limbo for a while, since no one else could work with the licensed new material my company was using on his home. On top of that, the lawyer that our company hired to sue the customer went AWOL. They had to find a new lawyer that did nothing for months. So instead, they got paperwork in the mail telling them that the customer was suing them for breaking contract. Not true. It was the other way around. This led to the new business partner screwing over the head of the company and stealing money from the joint accounts as they ran away, ultimately leading to the head of the construction company closing down their business/HOC's life work from all the lost money. They never got to countersue the customer, and the customer had to drop the case because they didn't really have anything. In the end, though, they got to have half of their new mansion built for a 16th of the price before getting someone new to finish it up, and they screwed an honest company out of business. The whole time I was trying to figure out if the guy was actually trying to screw over the whole building of the mansion or if he was just stupid. Like, the lawsuits would have you believe, yeah, it was on purpose, it was all a ploy, but also, it really just could be someone who is completely clueless and then tell stories about it like they're the one right. You know what I mean? You ever been told a story like that where someone's telling you something and you're like, I don't think you did a good thing here. Or, do you think you did a good thing? That's the vibe I get. Not from OP, just to be clear. I think OP, it just got screwed. I mean, lawsuit guy. Anyway, a shorter video today. This thread didn't have a whole lot in it, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. I also hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.